I'm starting to think that the way that I feel about this Deadpool movie and old League of Legends is maybe how we should feel about G2 2019. I think it's time for us all to let it go. It's a pocket pick. You've got it in the side on your pocket. If all you have are the picks in the pocket, that's just your champ pool. Hello and welcome to episode 18 of the EUphoria podcast ahead of week 1 of the LEC Season Finals. As always, we're available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and SoundCloud.
Yeah, and this week we talk all about our expectations coming off of Fnatic versus G2, what we thought of it, who's on Drakos'
naughty list. We'll call it the naughty list.
The naughty list.
Yeah,
who we had some choice words for. And then also who we are looking at for the upcoming season finals and kind of a lot of our expectations for those teams and where we expect them to place.
Yeah, we also talk a little bit about the messages that you send us on Twitter and YouTube. So let's get into it. And here we are. Another week, another episode of EUphoria Season Finals time, baby. We had a little bit of a break, but now we're back. Our life is League of Legends.
Yeah.
But in the brief period where it wasn't League of Legends, we went and saw a movie together, Rob.
Yeah. It was
Wolverine,
great.
Deadpool.
It was fantastic.
That's overselling it.
Yeah. You walked out right. That was so much.
No. I'm going to tell you right now, the first scene in that movie, I don't want to spoil it for people. I'm sure there's already GIFs of it out there, was great. It hit every button I needed to hit from that film. After that, I don't know. I didn't need 2.5. That movie did not need to be 2.5 hours.
Yeah, it was fairly long.
Yeah.
But like that kind of humor just tickles me. Like that is the kind of humor that I love. So I'm just like, yeah.
I'm with you. And like if you enjoyed either the other Deadpool films or you love nostalgia bait, there's a lot of nostalgia bait in this. I feel like people are going to enjoy the movie.
Yeah.
That's the 2.5 hours.
The problem is the last two movies I saw in the cinema were Flash and Mad Max Furiosa.
Which you know how I feel about Mad Max. I can't remember if we talked about this on the podcast already, but Mad Max Furiosa was terrible.
It was awful.
It was terrible. So I don't want to oversell Deadpool, Wolverine X Deadpool or whatever, but it's better. It's solid.
Better.
It's a solid film. Is it a perfect film? No. Can you tell they spent all their budget on that first scene? Yes, 100%. Yeah. But it's cool. There's a lot of like comic nerd fandom moments. There's a lot of like early 2000s / late 90s nerd moments. Like it's good.
Yeah, I think there was definitely a lot of moments where I kind of was like, because I'm not a big comic guy.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, I don't really get the reference, but I'm sure there is a reference here.
Yeah.
And so I think if you are a big comic person, you'll enjoy it 10 times more because you're like, oh, I get all these little niche things.
It's very like, there's a lot of kind of like obviously in the first Deadpool, there's a lot of like meta commentary and fourth wall breaking. And there's a lot of that here that's done very well. Again, the movie is long though, so like after the 8th time you laugh at like a joke that's concept is basically the same, you're like, but you know what? A lot of people said it was bad and a lot of people said it was amazing. I feel like it's in the middle of that. As long as your expectations aren't sky high, I think it's a solid movie.
I think it's
enjoyable.
Above average. That's kind of where,
it was enjoyable.
Yeah.
But on the subject of nostalgia as well, I'm appreciating more and more how long League has been running because the like LOL Season World Championship Twitch channel that starts streaming counting down to Worlds.
Yeah,
that's already started.
That's insane.
They were on season 2 the other day. Bro, season 2 League of Legends is wild. Also, season 2 casting, ladies and gentlemen, wild. You have to understand that in order for me to hold on to my early career heroes, I cannot go back and watch season 2, season 3 casting. I remember being like, God, these guys are goated.
Yeah.
And you go back and it's like, they're great. For the time, they're incredible, right? And the same is true for the players as well, right? But you go back and you're like, damn. Like, guys, I don't know how to tell you this, but if you ever get a time machine and have want an ego boost, any of you in like Emerald right now, you can go back and be a pro in League of Legends. Yeah. If you just go back to like season 2, I'm telling you, it is wild. The amount of just random A-ramming, like the amount of just group up and siege a tower for no reason,
and hope for the best.
Ignore waves, it's crazy. And obviously there's a lot of context. The game has changed a lot, but I don't know, man. I'm just feeling very nostalgic this week.
Fair, yeah. Yeah, I kind of like, I went back and looked at a couple of old games before and it was just like, what is happening? Because you used to think, oh my God, they're so smart. This is the thing. And you're like, we've just come so far across that period that it's just so different now that it's insane.
Yeah.
But even from the casting perspective, it's like the things we think about now you wouldn't have even thought about back then. Like how the cadence, the words, the mixing it up. Like there's so much that we think about as casters, even like your word economy, which I'm doing very poorly with right now.
Sure.
You don't really think about when you're at that stage back then.
Yeah, and I think that it's still impressive without the kind of existing kind of structures that we have when we think about League of Legends casting. Because obviously you play League of Legends, you know a lot of innate League of Legends terminology, and a lot of that terminology didn't exist back then. So it's interesting to hear them explain what we would now consider like a simple concept. You know what I mean? And it's also interesting to hear like Riv is a really good speaker. That's what I will say. Like, damn, that man is a good speaker. Yeah. Like, because even without the kind of backbone structure of League of Legends, casting craft and like years of being able to see how other people do it and the game progressing and everything kind of evolving, like that guy is still really, really well spoken.
Yeah, no, Valorant stole him and we're just like,
Valorant stole him. Freak, on the other hand, insane glow up, bro. This guy's color kind of like Freak is just talking about random like stuff that at the time I'm sure was super analytically relevant, but I'm like, what is this man talking about? But like the fact that this man kept going for as long as he did at between color and play-by-play and was really good. I know there was a lot of Freak haters in the Freak era. I think we're always trolling. Freak is a goated play-by-play caster, but like, god, that's just so crazy to me. It did make me also think though, you know how like we're all recognizing League of Legends players that were getting older, that like, guys, there's 2000 it's not 80s and 90s parties anymore, folks. It's 2000s parties. Yeah, you're old. I'm starting to think that the way that I feel about this Deadpool movie and old League of Legends is maybe how we should feel about G2 2019. I think it's time for us all to let it go. That's what I've decided on this week of reflection, because I have these moments where I'm like, I don't need another Ghostbusters. I don't need another Jurassic Park. I don't need another
But I do need another G2.
I do, but I need to let it go. It's going to be different. You know, if we want, we can't be like, yes, finally G2 2019 again. We need something different. No, I think it's how I'm feeling. There's too much nostalgia. Rob, as an outsider, you weren't there for 2019 G2. Do we all just need to let it go? Or are you like, hey, it's okay that you hold on to this to a weird degree, European fans?
I went to Korea to watch Fnatic in 2018. I was there. I was just a fan. So it's like, I'm still holding on to it, but everyone else, I'm still there.
I think I think we need to let it die. I'm going to say I think we need to let it go. I think we can hold on to it in conversations with North America because it's still relevant there. Yeah. But I think otherwise we just need to be like, you know what? It's a new era.
No, I think if you actually give up on it, I think that's when we really start to fall.
No, I'm not saying give up on international success. We need to stop. We can't just keep holding on to this. Remember 2019? That was the year. I'm not saying we shouldn't hold ourselves to a high standard. Yeah. I'm just saying we need to. I at least am going to I'm going to chill, because every time people talk about like any G2 player, they're like, "You remember 2019?" Yeah. And I'm guilty of this too, but people do it, and it's because it was a great year. But I'm just saying, maybe like the 15th Ghostbusters reboot, we could just not. You know, we could just let Wonder be Wonder for recent achievements and performance. Yeah. We could just talk about Caps recently. We could talk about G2 recently. You know, or even in the other years where they did pretty good. Yeah, it doesn't have to be like.
I do agree with that,
but because we don't say Fnatic Season 1 World Champions. I mean, I just did, and technically counts, but we don't bring it up a lot. And I'm just saying we got to tone it down on the G. That's my takeaway from this amount of nostalgia. And it's especially relevant, Rob, because if you watched our most recent G2 Fnatic Summer Finals, which if you haven't watched the series yet, this is where we get into spoiler territory. So you've been warned. 3-0.
Exactly as planned. I knew from the start exactly where I was going to go. I think it was clean. It was calculated.
Yeah.
It ran smoothly. Great macro at all points in time. I don't think we have to talk about it.
Yeah, I think
agree. That's the summary. That's all you need to know.
I think that...
See you later. Bye. That's been this episode of EUphoria. Great job.
Yeah. Let's just never bring it up. I'm trying to think about how to describe this. I think that there's a certain amount of disaster present in that series that you couldn't plan or write. Like, again, if it was a script, no one would believe you. It would be corny if it hadn't actually happened, but it did happen. And it was rewatching that series was an experience, Rob. Because in the moment, I was just kind of like, what? And then when you have to rewatch it and just only look at the mini map,
yeah,
and then the kill feed, you're like, this is the weirdest final we have ever had.
Yeah.
3-0, Fnatic was winning every single game. Every single game. G2 was chain feeding every single early game to the point where I asked our stats team, I'm like, I need the bad stats for both sides. I need to know. Mikyx's average deaths per game is almost 1 before 8 minutes.
I mean, he just ran it. Level
He's just
1,
guaranteed. You have to understand,
3.
the next highest support of our remaining supports is 0.3, Rob. He's 0.9. He is 3 times more likely to die in the first 8 minutes than any other support.
Yeah.
And at the same time, he was insanely clutch.
Yeah.
Like, he dies at that Poppy game. He goes top. He saves the top gank. He, like, knocks Noah to stop the Jhin thing to keep Caps alive and disrupts a bunch of team fights. And, like,
but is Mikyx clutch or is Fnatic just not setting up well? Because, like, I'm not going to lie. Like, this series made me angry. Yep. Like, there are games that I come off of and I'm like, the reason I, like, got into League of Legends, the reason I love my job is because I get to watch really cool things where it's like you are thinking through how you want to operate on the map. You're doing creative and smart things. I'm like, oh, that's sick. I can see the thought process behind this. There was so many times in this series where I went, what are Fnatic doing? Like, why are you here? Why are you investing in like a TP top to try and make a pick? Why are you throwing away resources that you have? And that's the part that really frustrated me. And like, sure, he got that clutch Poppy charge onto Noah when he opened up with the curtain call, but you're also like, why are you even setting up like this where you're just like looking for a pick on top side? You've let G2 come in behind you. There was so many question marks for me as to what the hell Fnatic are doing in this game or even across this series, and it just did not make sense to me. And I think that's where it's like, sure, you can talk about clutch, but I was also just very annoyed coming off because it's like you had the things and it's the same problems for Fnatic every split that they have, and they've not fixed them. And it's so frustrating then to see it completely fall apart for the umpteenth time again. And it's like, oh, and this is not coming from a place of, I want to hate on Fnatic. I want to see Fnatic do well at internationals. I want to be able to look at our region and go, hey, we've got several teams that compete, that can take games off of LPL and LCK and look sick and have good League of Legends. But it's so frustrating when you see them again just run through the same malarkey and get caught out again. And it just ruins it for me.
I love you said malarkey. I haven't heard anyone say malarkey in a while. Yeah, I agree. And it's also disappointing because we had such a insane first best of 5, right? For Fnatic to make it to finals.
And that's what I wanted
to final bounce. Yeah, and it's really tough when a team... It's hard to watch for a lot of reasons because they built the leads. Mm-hmm. And yes, as much as they trolled to throw the leads, G2 did troll a little bit to give them leads. It was like they were messy games overall. A lot of mistakes. But then to see them build the leads and then to see them individually and as a team make bad decisions or not show up in crucial moments is like, I don't know. I want to stop being in this position with teams where it's like, I would rather a team from like a fan, I can't handle the roller coaster. I don't know how Fnatic and like G2 fans do it because both these teams are so volatile. And honestly, a lot of LEC teams in general are volatile because like, I just want a team that does like, I don't think anything has made me a bigger BDS fan than watching that G2 Fnatic finals because I just want a team and BDS, you're not above this because of that whole KC series was weird. And the week before that. But generally, I just want a team I can rely on. You know, I want a team where I come home, you know what I mean? The chores are done. You know, we're like on the same page. Yeah. I feel like I know what I'm going to get from you. Yeah. And I just don't feel that way about Fnatic. I feel about Fnatic the way I used to feel about like the Mad Lions and Vitalities of the world. And I just feel like Fnatic are just the Vitality chaos on a higher level. You know
that's why I was going to say I have the utmost respect for BDS because every time I come into a split, I can tell that BDS have gone, this is the thing we're going to work on. Yep. We're going to work on side lanes. Okay, this split was, Shale, you're going to be a carry because AP junglers need to be a thing. All right, Labrov, you have to now be our engage tool, and you're going to work it out. I think Israel was definitely the better of the engage options, don't get me wrong. But it's, hey, this is what BDS are working on. I don't get that feeling with a lot of other teams. And G2 is included in this, where it's
sure, yeah.
I don't get the feeling of, hey, I can see you actively working on a thing, and then you will get better at it, and then it's, okay, now we move to the next part of our game. And that's the part that makes me sad.
Yeah, I think that G2, credit to them, though, when they said they were going to work on mid-game, that really showed.
Yeah.
Right? Like that, and that has shown itself all year. I just think that the thing for me is that G2 provide the same layer of chaos where it's like, G2, in theory, are a good enough team to just not feed early game. And they do a lot. And so it's like, G2, if they weren't winning, would be in the same boat that I put like the Fnatics of the world in, where I'm like, guys, what is going on? Like, I know you're good. And they're like almost like inverse Fnatic, because Fnatic can win any early game and not win the actual game, and G2 can lose every early game and somehow still win in the end. Like, in that sense, like we have the yin yang of like slightly disappointing top teams.
Yeah. And then the little balls are like their third or fourth, like the little bit of darkness and light. Someone we should.
All right. Yeah. I don't understand enough about yin yang, but I'm glad that you followed up there and clearly filled in the games. But I think the thing is, like, when I look back at the series, right, it's hard to know what to take away from this, and I'm just really glad that was not. I am really glad that we have season finals to clarify.
Yeah.
Because even if you remember last year's season final, right, it was unfortunate because Oscar stepped out, broken hand, and like Wonder had to step in, but the team did really well. And I think that I'm hoping for obviously all 5 starters to play, but I'm hoping that we see a similar like glow up here where the way that these teams end the season is really confidence inspiring. Obviously, we already know G2 is one of our seeds, but I want the other 2 seeds to be good. And I also just want Munich to be good, man. I don't want to see that. We do not need that many people to watch that final again in person. You know, like we need a better final than that. For all of Munich, all of LEC, and certainly all of Germany deserves a better final than that.
The smidge of copium that I have is these are the teams that were coming back from MSI, and there was a drastic shift in the meta. Like when you look at AP junglers coming in, AD mids
and like
coming in.
EWC, really dense schedule. Like, these guys have been grinding.
So from that perspective, I don't know how much time they had to really get their footing before they just launched into 6 weeks of games, right? So I'm hoping that with a little bit of time off, they can actually come in swinging and be like, okay, cool, we figured out a play. Because I think the meta is going to be somewhat similar coming into season finals. We can probably get onto that later. But I think that looking at that, these couple of weeks, like the form that you come into season finals on is kind of going to be a decider. But it is only copium, because at the end of the day, this wasn't like a champion thing. This wasn't like, hey, you didn't know how to play this. It was, you're messing up your side lanes. You're overextending. You're getting caught out. You're misplaying team fights. It's like, those are less champion specific and more holistic issues within the team, right?
And again, it's weird because ultimately the games felt messy, but Fnatic did play some pretty solid early games. And G2 did play really good mid to late games. Like, they caught Fnatic probably more than they should have, but they were really good at picking up side waves. They did really well. I think overall, right, a couple people come out of this series on my shit list. Let's just put it out there, because I don't think you can be like, we're approaching the end of the year and like we need people to shape up. And so I don't want to make this like an opportunity to make personal attacks on people on an individual level, but on a professional level and on a play level, like I'm very concerned with Fnatic on their level of performance. And I want to especially say that I'm worried about Noah, because I think that Noah, like, I'm not going to say whether or not he, like choked, because that's obviously like a mental thing and I don't know how he is, but he certainly underperformed in moments where he shouldn't have, where he had massive, massive gold leads and should have been the force to carry Fnatic, was ultimately never able to carry. And he needs to be better in those moments. Like, that is the reality of the situation. He needs to be better, because that is tragic. Like that is, I hope that does not haunt him, but that will haunt most people. You know what I mean? And Fnatic fans aren't going to forget that anytime soon. And they'll forgive him, I'm sure. It's a very loyal fan base. But I also like doubly want to call out Noah, because I think that this is a position that's so hard, because sports psychology is complex enough in one's own language. And like Noah's English, I'm not here to tell you that there's like communication barriers for League of Legends. He seems to communicate and get along with the team just fine when the team is vibing. There was some, discoordinated team fights, but I don't think that was a language issue. I think that was a probably overall Fnatic issue. But like, I really feel for a guy who has to, in a language that is not his own, handle any kind of psychological issue. That sucks. Like, I don't even know how Fnatic are doing that. I hope that they have a cool and interesting approach that will like make that easier for him, because ultimately, as good as Noah has been on those 3-item carries and in a lot of those clutch moments in past splits for Fnatic, you know, when they needed that late game carry, that late game insurance, like that is a crushing defeat.
Yeah.
And like that was bad.
But I think there is a difference between performing in a clutch and performing when you are the guy.
Yeah.
And that seems to be where Noah falls apart. Like he has had clutch moments where he's brought it back from the brink. And I think there's no pressure in that scenario, right? Because if you just you can try and make the play. If you fail, there's no pressure. You tried your best. Fair play to you.
Yeah, if you're the guy who's behind or like everyone else dies and you're like, this is my moment to turn the play, like you're actually clutch. Yeah. Right? That's a good important
exactly.
distinction.
And I think that's where the distinction is for me is like this series showed that when Noah had these massive leads, he couldn't be
that guy. Yeah, he couldn't. He
arcing shifted into weird places. He got caught out several times, and like even getting caught out on the Caitlyn in previous series as well. Like there was so many times where I was just like, oh, you have just been. There's too many times where you've been in this situation where you can be the carry and it hasn't worked out. And I don't think that's so much of a team thing of hey, we're not enabling Noah. It's he has put himself in awkward positions and then hasn't been able to do it.
Well, I think it's especially clear on Ezreal, right? A champion who's notoriously hard to lock down and Noah keeps getting locked down, right? There's some of that. Some of that is G2 being good at catching that. And some of that is also Fnatic not setting up great around fights. Yeah. Like, right, we talked about that. They're pretty discoordinated or uncoordinated around some of those objectives or not always on the same page. But the lion's share still has to go to the person piloting the champion to call for what they need or to not, you know, good Ezreals have to arcane shift in.
Exactly.
Sometimes, you know, but if you're dying, it probably wasn't the right arcane shift in.
Yeah, and I think that's what like separates good and great AD carries in my head. I've already, I think, talked about it on this podcast, if not back on the last hit when I was in the LPL, is like, there is I think it's, for me, it's like the killer instinct. It's seeing that moment where you're like, this is it, I'm going in. And there are some AD carries that are very good and will play safe, and they will always be very good, very stable AD carries that will just carry a team fight for you, but they will never make a team fight for you or bring a team fight back from the brink. Yeah. I think that's like where you look at like the rulers of the world, where you look at the Vipers of the world, these kind of guys where they will have that moment where they see the thing. They just have it where they're like, this is, I can carry from this. I'm not going to be able to be controlled, and they just take over a fight. Yeah. And I think that's what's missing, unfortunately, from Noah. And it's not that he's not trying to do that, which I think is more credible because I prefer players that are at least willing to give it a shot.
Sure, yeah.
But it's just that he just doesn't quite see the moment correctly and then ends up putting himself in a bad position.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of awkward moments in this series, certainly. But for a guy who had gold leads for the most of the series, right, it wasn't enough. Yeah. And I think that I'm not going to say the sole blame rests on his shoulders, right? There were a lot of unavoidable mistakes, but a lot of people on the team made mistakes. Yeah. I think the other person on the Fnatic side, don't worry, G2 has members on the shit list too, Fnatic.
Oh, yeah, we're going to get there. Yeah.
We'll get there. I'll just go to the other person. The other one is Oscar, right? I think that, like, Oscar's first game against the BB's Kennen looked really good. Yeah. And then after that, like, he especially even in game 3 where he had these massive gold leads, it's a situation where we've seen him here before, I think against MDK it was, when El Yo-Yo was playing Volibear jungle, where he had this massive, like, 2.5k gold lead, and it just didn't matter, right? It didn't feel like, Renekton didn't feel impactful. And some of that, again, is a team thing, right? Renekton isn't a chain, it's not solo queue. He can't just, like, AFK push top wave and, you know, trust the enemy AD carry is going to walk in division and do nothing. But, like, this is a situation where BB loses lane in every game, and yes, it's Ornn, but then it's just always more impactful.
Yeah.
Right? Which is crazy because, like, yeah, they dove him a lot. They did a lot to set Oscarinin up for success. But, you know, this is a series where he just wasn't outside of game 1.
I do feel a little bad for him because the biggest problem I have is, like, if you are Renekton and you're trying to walk into Zyra, that just sucks. Yeah. Because you get locked up, you get ulted, whatever. You walk into Brand, same idea. You're just walking into the ultimate. And I think there's a lot of issues there where I think you need good fight setup so you can find flanks that go away from that. So the person on my shit list actually wasn't Oscarinin, it was Jun. Because Jun has been incredibly strong. And I've loved Jun. Like, I've been touting him as one of the best, if not the best supports. This was a terrible series from him. The moments that he went for engages were awful. There was, like, so many of those comeback moments from G2 were like, oh, we see BB pushing bot lane, no TP. Oscarinin is on top side. We know all the members of G2 are in around the Baron area. And Jun just walks in, doesn't have the rest of the team ready. Oscarinin hasn't come across, and he just gets caught out and died.
Yeah, that one next to mid lane. Next to
Myrwn. Exactly. Yeah. Then you look at the next game, or maybe even later on in that game, they're all pushing down mid. They force G2 out on that bottom side. And Jun just walks into G2 who are trying to connect with their mid lane tier 2. And then he dies. And I'm like, what are you doing? Like, usually Jun is incredible. But if you're in these situations as Oscarinin, what are you supposed to do? Like, your support's gone in. I'm now walking through a choke point to get onto Brand and Zyra and everything. It's like, so I do agree with you where, look, he had these leads, he could have used them. But my God, Jun, you could have done anything to try and set that up better.
I mean, this was on a team coordination level really bad. And obviously this is the tricky thing about levying any criticism against an individual. Like, we don't have comms. We don't know what the intention was. Yeah. But you're right. Like, and I think it just reminds me that regardless of which names we want to call out, like, all of Fnatic was messy this week, right? And like all of them, they just, it was really bad. I think on the G2 side, Mikyx, I said he's clutch, but homeboy's
that
feeding.
level 1 was insane, man.
Every
game 2 and game 3, I was like, have you not learned? It's the same matchup. You just nearly died, and then game 3 you died to it. I'm like, what's going on?
And it's one of those things where, again, there's a lot of fights where he's really, really good. Mm-hmm. And I think he makes aggressive moves that, like, look great.
Yeah.
But it does not excuse... Like, again, inversely, credit to Jun for great level 1s and punishing Mikyx. Doesn't excuse feeding in the mid game. Yeah. Mikyx, you can't feed in the early game, but you did make a bunch of plays in the mid game that were really important, right? Like, I think a lot of his most bold, aggressive engages I really liked. And to be honest, there's one fight where he's like, I think Flash Nautilus hooking with where BB's first on the roam, but BB's not even there yet, but he's starting a fight knowing that BrokenBlade will be there first, knowing that if they can just blow up this target that they'll have their top laner first, and Oscar ends up TPing way too late and G2 getting an advantage. And like, I like that he sees those mid-game angles and is willing to make those plays based on a game state that's going to exist 5 seconds in the future rather than like, oh, this guy's out of position right now.
The problem is you should never be in those positions. Like, why are you as G2 in a position already where Mikyx ran a bot lane? Your dive, the dives in this game from G2 were atrocious. Mm-hmm. Every single time Yike died or was close to dying or someone died on the dive. Like the game 1, level 2, they try and dive bot lane. It's like you can push third wave. You just saw Zyra go into your top side. So you know there's no one on this bottom side. Play it slow. Hit level 3 for your bot lane. Hit level 3 for your jungler and then dive bot. There is no need to try and force at level 2. Everyone knows level 2 dives are a disaster because you don't have half your ability. Well, the extra third ability you need.
Also, has exhaust. It's like, where your damage going to come from?
And it was, I don't know. And that's where it's like, yes, you can be clutch, but my God, G2, you should not be putting yourself in these positions because these are fundamental basic errors. And like being clutch in the mid game doesn't pull it off anymore. Like you have to be good early. Like there is no other team that I can think of that goes, hey, we're going to work on mid game, and then just throws out everything with their early game. Like everything is just gone out the window. And even like BrokenBlade, I think, has been one of the top performers alongside Caps. Like I think Caps is the only one that kind of comes out of this unscathed, to be honest. I think Caps had a good series and was kind of doing the best that he could. But for like BrokenBlade has been great all split long. And I've been kind of saying, look, when G2 first came back from MSI, it was kind of BrokenBlade and Caps holding the ship together because it looked messy and BB was great. But this series, BB level 3 jumped onto Oscarinin on top side and then as Kennen, or level 2 was that as Kennen, gets completely blown up, has no HP, and it's like, well, you just know that Zyra's already traded into top side and you're going to die. Why are you going for these aggressive
He had that
trades?
all in bottom lane against Humanoid when Humanoid, I think it was Lucian.
Yeah, on the Lucian.
Where and this one I feel so bad for him because he was really close to getting the 1v1. You can rewatch the clip. He goes in, this is bottom lane, blue side, next to tier 2. He goes in, he ults, he rocket belts. His W comes off cooldown. The W active comes off cooldown. But because of the way the Storm procs have worked out, it's right when the most recent Storm proc had been consumed. So there's not a proc,
left,
but the minion is marked. So right as Lucian's going for the last auto, he pushes W, he zaps a minion, and he dies. It's so tragic. Because it lights up, and he's probably like, yes, but he doesn't realize that Lucian isn't marked anymore, right? Yeah. And that it's the only reason it's lighting up is because this minion to the side of him, and he just dies.
Fair.
But the thing is actually, like, as much as, you want to be critical of BrokenBlade, I feel like the reason that the Ornn was good.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it doesn't excuse the early game, but, like, BB was really good at being where he needed to be. And obviously, Ornn as a champion is just going to deliver gold value, blah, 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 with the upgrades. But, like, BrokenBlade consistently had good ults in the fights. And, like, he never should have been dying. That game one was especially bad. I respect the just swapping to Ornn. It's just more
Also,
reliable.
sorry, on a side note, we need more Senna Ornn. Like, that is just being abused in LCK and LPL. It is really strong. I can understand.
No
like,
one's going to play that here.
But that's the thing. It's like, I don't know. Anyway, I think we need it, but we'll move on.
Yeah. And the last note is like, there were good moments from a lot of players in the series. We're like talking a lot about what went wrong because it makes it hard to trust either of these top teams.
But the thing is, so I said to you before the podcast, I want to talk about this. I think we need a fundamental paradigm shift in the way that we view League of Legends in Europe. So when I look at teams in the LPL and LCK, their understanding of how we want to set up the game is we are playing for better map position. Whereas in Europe, the way we look at the game is we are playing to deny gold and increase our gold advantage over the enemy team. And I think that's where we're seeing this big dichotomy between the two regions. Because if you look at, like, there've been examples that have been seen in Europe over the last, like, say, 2 splits, where say you've got like really strong split pushers. Mm-hmm. In Europe, if the enemy team had Rift Herald and you are in the lead, but the enemy team has Rift Herald, you end up playing to deny the gold the enemy can get from Rift Herald versus just saying, hey, we can trade towers on each side of the map because we're split pushers. We actually end up in a better map position to play for. Mm-hmm. Whereas the LPL and LCK will take that trade because they know, hey, we may not grow our gold lead now, but in the future, we are in a significantly stronger position on the map to then get that gold back plus tenfold because we can abuse side lanes. And it's also, I was talking this with Kadro, we went climbing 2 days ago, whatever it was, because he had Razork on to his stream and was going through jungle routes and everything. And Razork was like, hey, in this position, I would use Herald to take the tier 2 and bot when they have a lead. And then it came back to, well, JDG didn't. They ended up taking the mid lane tier 2 instead. The mid lane tier 1 instead, and was like, hey, we get less gold. But they used the fact they'd taken the mid tier 1 to then get a pick in the enemy jungle and win the game. And I think this is the problem that we have in Europe, is that we oftentimes are looking to go, hey, how can I grow my gold lead or minimize the enemy gold income versus how can I just set up the map better to abuse them? And I think what fundamentally it comes down to is, like, it doesn't matter if you have 2,000 gold more on your AD carry. If your AD carry can't get into a fight because we have better map position or they can't auto attack, we just win the fight because you cannot abuse the fact that you have that gold lead. Yeah. And I think that's where a lot of the mistakes are coming from in LEC, is that we aren't actually considering, hey, I can skip spending this 800 gold or even 1,000 gold at times, because it'll give me better position on the map to deny the enemy income or resources in a fight in the long run. And I think that's where G2 are one of the teams that are starting to shift that. And it's why they're so good in the mid game, because you'll see them go, hey, we will drop a dragon position or we'll drop a mid wave because we're then going to get 2 waves on top, take a mid tower, and then have a better position to then abuse your topside jungle. And I think that's where we need more teams like Fnatic to start to realize that you have to have this shift in thought process. Because I think otherwise you're just going to end up in the same cycle of, oh, we get these gold leads, we got that little win with the tier 2 bot, but actually we lost mid tower, we lost top tier 1, and now they're able to play off of a side lane push that we can't really abuse because we haven't gotten the mid tier 1 on the enemy side, right? I think that's where we need to see that shift.
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think it's, so to recap, to make sure we're on the same page here, teams in Europe, from your perspective right now, are overvaluing maybe the immediate tangible value of gold leads, right? Versus the future gold or future advantage that something like better map positioning, or perhaps like the loss of gold to better set what your comp needs up for success. Yeah,
but even the lack of spending gold. So there are times where
resisting the temptation, let's say, to recall.
Yeah, and even this is coming back to, again, Razork and Kadro talking on the stream, which was, Razork was like, I would reset here because then I'm able to spend 860 gold, I get my item, I then come back out of the map. I will be slightly late for objective setup, but now I'm stronger. Whereas when you look at Kanavi and the LPL teams, they would say, no, what we're actually going to do is I'm going to stay on the map. I will not reset and spend that gold, but it means that I can contest you on this choke point, which is actually the choke point that we need to win because of the way our composition operates. And I think it's that thought process of what is more valuable for me as a player versus what is more valuable as the composition and the map position, and denying because it doesn't matter how much gold your enemy has if they can't use that efficiently. Like if the enemy AD carry or the enemy mid lane can't actually deal damage, they could be 6 items and you could be 1 item, but if they can't deal the damage, you're going to win anyway, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's the thought process that the LPL and the LCK teams have, but we just haven't quite caught up to it yet.
Yeah, I definitely see that. I think that manifests very clearly in a lot of games where you see the Oscar example you just gave is great, right? Like where you have a very fed Renekton who on paper can one-shot any carry on the enemy team and tank 1 million damage, right? He's got Sterix, he's got Cleaver, he's got whatever. But if you're walking into fog every single time, if you aren't able to find flanks because you don't have the better vision control, whatever, no matter how many tier 2s you got to extend your gold lead, right? If that's not manifesting in control that allows you to get into melee range of those champions, like, is it worth anything? Yeah. And against certain comps, yes, the answer would be yes, it is still worth something. But against, as you highlighted, Zyras and Brands of the world, like the answer is no, you will die and you will be stunned and you will die.
Yeah, but it's also like if you're playing against a Zyra and a Brand, right? If you have a Zyra and Brand on your team, is it better for you to go back, spend that gold? Maybe it's like, hey, I pick up a Blasting Wand or something, right? And then take the fight in River? Or is it better for me to stay on the map and fight you at a choke as you are trying to get into River? Because it's always going to be the choke point that makes the difference in that. If they can't get into the fight because of that choke point, that's 10 times more valuable than you having a Blasting Wand.
Yeah, I think the struggle probably is, though, that like you can't guarantee that someone is going to walk into that choke, right? Like you can't guarantee you're going to necessarily get that angle. Whereas like if you back, you get that Blasting Wand. You are stronger on paper if that fight does break out. So I see like I can, and again, this is just me playing devil's advocate here, right? Like I can see why a team would say, hey, if we're assuming we're going to fight them for Drake, right? Like we can't guarantee that this position, like even if you in theory can, like or more or less can, like it's not the 100% sure thing. Backing and getting it does make you quote unquote mathematically stronger, but is the extra 40 AP worth more than being able to hit 5 people grouped up? But I think this is why we lose
every time at internationals. Like, I'm going to be straight up with you.
This is why, wow. Bam, to the point.
Yeah, this is why. It's because the LPL and LCK teams are much more aware of how they can set up these fights favorably. And it's maybe it's not like, hey, you have to walk through the choke point, but we're going to force you into these awkward positions where you are either going to lose on a side lane or the map is set up in a better position. And there was so many times in that Fnatic series coming back to that G2 Fnatic, which was Fnatic clear side lane, Fnatic clear side lane, Fnatic get the wave. Or they would reset, spend gold, and then go and clear the side wave. And it meant that G2 got the reset that they needed to get into the bottom side of the map and force them out. Or like G2 didn't have to then go and play off of pushing out top as you were coming back out of the map. There are ways to force the enemy to have to deal with things, and it doesn't always have to be a choke, but there are ways that eventually they will have to take one of them, and then you can take so much more off the back of it. I think that's the problem that I have, is that like we don't have enough teams in LEC that are realizing they can do that.
Yeah, I wonder if we see that shift, or actually like this would be a good time. We should probably get a coach in or two to see how they feel, to see if they would disagree with you, because I'm not as equipped to have this conversation with you, probably as someone who coaches these teams every single day. Because I know G2 are like very aware of mid-game, very aware of waves.
And also, I wanted to give a shout out to Memento. Yeah. Because I had a conversation with him ages ago. He was helping me like go through some things because he put out a video and I was like, had a couple of questions on it. And he kind of was like talking through what the European way that the game is seen. So I want to give a shout out to him because he was really, really helpful.
Yeah, good content.
Great content.
Great Olaf accidental stopwatch usage. Not his most iconic career moment, but shout out to Memento. Old blood LEC at this point. I think final note in the series, like still a great game from Caps, still a clutch moment from a lot of G2 players, and a lot of like sick moments in the early game from Fnatic. I think there's a lot of reasons to be excited for these teams based on that series. There are a lot of teams to be sad based on that series, and you can focus on whichever you want. I don't think that either of these teams are pervious coming into our season finals, but there are going to be a lot of players that I think have the potential to surprise us. We went to Twitter and asked for, Twitter and YouTube. We asked like, who do y'all think is going to surprise? Who's going to shape us up? As I stall to scroll to the part where I copy pasted these tweets. Start with Checkmate 1860 on YouTube. I will slot in Jackies. I think he'll carry GX to semis. Jackies. Okay, so Jackies, for people who don't remember, the season finals format is the same as our old playoffs format, which means top 4 are upper bracket, 5th and 6th are lower bracket. So we don't know who Jackies is going to play yet. He's the lowest seed in playoffs at 6th. Double check to make sure I'm not trolling, which means he will get the higher of the seeds that drop down. So let's say like G2.
Yeah, Fnatic or BDS.
Fnatic or BDS.
So, because basically
unless G2 drop down, it's Fnatic or BDS. Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying is like MDK. Yeah, it'll always be Fnatic or BDS that they face essentially, right? Because
unless G2 get upset.
Yes.
Yeah. Short of a G2 upset, they're very likely to play Fnatic or BDS, which is a tall task to beat. And so I do think that Jackies is hype. I also think that there are changes to Yone.
Yeah.
I think small buffs, but that's promising. I think there's room for experimentation on a new patch in terms of the mid lane, and this is a player who I think is very, very creative. He's got that zoomer energy. That's the short way I'm going to describe players who want to play weird stuff on stage and are doing TikTok Yone combos.
That's what I was going to say. Odoamne backstage just randomly was like, I mean, Jackies, he's just got the TikTok combo.
He's just got the TikTok combo. And he does just have the TikTok combo. So like Jackies is a guy that I'm excited about. And I think GX clearly play around him. He's still, the thing I like about Jackies is he'll go for the play. And he still does dumb stuff.
Yeah.
He's in that era of his career where he just dies on side lanes way too much. Every great European mid laner has it. And so he's on the road to greatness. He's got at least the bad habits, and he's got some of the good ones. Jackies, honestly, on this team is the guy that I'm just generally the most excited to watch. That said, like, it's a really tall task, right? Like, Worlds, I think, is the first goal for any team here in the season finals. And anyone who's already, like, pretty sure they're about Worlds, then they can focus on LEC and the prestige and the trophy. But G2 feel like such a daunting task. I think most teams are just like, top 3. G2 need to win, and then I need to get top 3. Or G2 lose, and I need to make it to finals, right? And that's what's on most teams' mind. But GX are going to need to be a step ahead of the meta, I think, for that to really be a possibility. Because as good as Jackies is, it's not like Humanoid and Nuke are bad mid laners. And unless Fnatic are full mental boom and just like get 3-0'd by BDS, like Giant X are not favored against any of their potential upcoming opponents, which again, for the record, the only 3 teams they can face are G2 in the event of a monumental upset by MDK, and then either Fnatic or BDS.
Yeah, and I think the biggest problem is I really enjoy watching Jackies play, but if he's going to continuously get caught out in mid-game, it's just going to make it nigh on impossible. And I think that is a very fixable thing, because it's more like hey, I need to be aware of, where lane states are, where the enemy could be trying to make a play in that. And these are moments that you can be coached on. So I do agree with you. I think Jackies is going to be an incredibly strong mid laner as we start to go on. Has he fixed this in 3 weeks or 2 weeks? Probably not. And I think that's going to be the biggest issue for Giant X is these are teams that are all very good at punishing those mistakes, and they will find those moments. And if you end up getting caught out, there's just no coming back. So I do like Giant X because we've seen they can get early game leads, but it's the mid game I'm most stressed for them.
Yeah, the mid game is rough for a lot of teams right now, and they've had good moments. I liked their signature flip Baron at 20 minutes. It's so good. T1 did it. It must be good. And to be fair, it's not as simple as it's not like there's reasons that they go for it, right? And the teams just don't come and then they start it. It's not as simple as just, guess we'll flip it. Like there's a map state that leads to it, right? Odo highlighted it really well when he was on the desk. But yeah, this is a team that I think, like, again, we've talked a lot about the players that have been like rising up and pressing us. Juhan was on your list, right? The Antonio has been surprisingly good. But at the end of the day, when we talk about Jackies and we talk about like what this team can really achieve, they're still, I think, the biggest underdogs in this season finals bracket, other than maybe Mad.
Yeah, probably.
SK, I think, is on the list too, but I have more confidence in SK. Again, SK lost to KC, but...
Yeah, but a decent summer still. Yeah.
Decent summer still overall, whereas MDK and GX are really the big question marks. And our next question is actually a Twitter thread that we thought is funny, and a little BM. And I want to be clear, I don't condone this behavior, but sometimes it's funny. Welcome to Brixton said, 0 people mentioning Mad means they'll be the biggest surprise once they lock Worlds. Supa and Alvaro will shock the world. And then this other guy, Chikemo, I don't know, he's got a raccoon. Yeah, the world is shocked by Mad every year. They sneak in every time in the most undeserved way, do absolutely nothing, and embarrass EU more than any other team ever could. That's quite an achievement given the overall... Wow, this guy's just roasting EU. I'm not going to read the rest. This is... Okay, so first point, funny. Second, leave Welcome to Brixton alone. The thread asked, who do you think is going to surprise? It didn't say roast people who you disagree with also. This man's just... we asked people for their opinion. He gave an opinion. He didn't do anything wrong. So sorry, Welcome to Brixton. You did not deserve that harassment, even if the answer was funny. Second point, before we talk about actual Mad, it's not their fault.
No.
The format allowed them to like sneak in the most fraudulent ways, but that was an issue with the format. Also, it's a completely different Mad team. Yeah. And yes, them being here after their one good split does feel a little bit weird. I'm not going to lie. But again, I think we have to let the Mad Lions international grudge die a little bit, because if they do it again with this new roster, then yes, you could be mad again. And yes, I'm still upset that they kept going to play-ins and losing to North American teams. It still bothers me, but it's a different team. The reason they got there without winning a best of 5 in the past was because their format had some holes in it, because we suddenly got a 4th seed for Worlds that we didn't anticipate. So that's not Mad Lions' fault. That's all I'll say. That said, Mad do have the potential to shock us, both with how good they are and with how bad they are. That they have proven on this lineup as well. They do look
good. Like, the thing is, so if you look objectively, take the first, 15 minutes.
Yes. If you put the blinders on.
Yeah.
If you lock that moment in time down and just rewatch
if you just watch the first 15 minutes, walk away, make yourself a cup of tea, and just assume all is good with Mad Lions Koi, you have a great time. Because the early games have been great. Like, Elyoya's, Talia, his AP junglers were sick. He was getting 4 kills in the early stages, popping off, but it's after that is where the issues started to come in. And I think that's the biggest problem for them, that is also the hardest part to coach, because it is hey, we need to try and get everyone working on the same page together. Also,
when you have a good early game, right, and that's your thing, your scrims probably don't make it to a mid-game state that's easily replicatable. Like, you're probably not coming into scrim mid-games at even gold.
Yeah.
You're coming in either to massive deficit or massive advantage, which isn't helpful to your practice. Because, Winter Mad Lions Koi, they just got 5K gold leads from being really good at fights and picking really good fights and individually outplaying. And then, mid-game's a lot easier when you have 6,000 extra gold. Unless you're playing against G2, as Fnatic learned, most teams just die, right? That's all you need. But
I think the other thing for Mad Lions Koi is that I wasn't the biggest fan of some of their comps. I think Alvaro's Braum is sick, and I think Braum is sick in certain situations.
I'm a big Braum fan.
But I do think you need engage elsewhere if you're going to play Braum. And that was kind of the biggest problem that I saw with a lot of their comps, was they would have no real setup for a team fight, and they kind of spent a lot of time trying to chase fights because they didn't really have the setup. And then once they overextended, the enemy team could re-engage because they actually had some form of CC or easy form of setup.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where they'd get these leads, but then it was we need Talia wall into Braum ult maybe to kind of be the engage. And it was you just don't really work, right? So I think that's where, if you can get these strong early games, have a little bit of a better setup for your team as Mad Lions Koi, I could definitely see it. But this is kind of why I brought up the Senna Oren thing. It was when I was watching Mad Lions games, I was looking then at LPL and LCK teams and going, hey, how do they, because they will play Braum or whatever it is, or low engage comps, how do they do it? And it's traditionally been hey, actually we'll go for Senna Oren in that bot lane to supplement as another engage tool, or we'll have a TF or rapid fire in the top lane, which we saw Myrwn start to bring out a little bit as a secondary engage setup. Or actually you just take Sejuani jungle, which we saw a lot of teams in Europe falling back towards. Yeah. So I think when we see the shift, because when you look at LCK is playing on 14-14, they're playing a little, Zyra is still kind of there, but with the nerf, she's not as strong. A lot of people over there are going back towards Maokai's and Sejuani's. I think we might see a step up then from Mad Lions Koi again, where they just have setup for the fights. I know Elyoya is still going to be a beast, because I think Elyoya, early game, was probably the best jungler we had this split that I can think of. Just straight up, whatever MDK did bad, but I don't think there was any jungler that was controlling that or dictating the pace of the early game as much as Elyoya was this split.
Yeah. I mean, I just think that when Alvaro and Elyoya work together, this team is so consistently good in the early game. And I think that to Welcome to Brixton's credit, Supa hasn't looked great. I want him to be good because I like pros who talk trash. I think that the tape isn't there right now, which is a shame. Even though he's had some good moments over the split, but like Alvaro is to me the real deal.
Yeah,
like he's legit as a top tier support. I think it's definitely undermined by a lot of their mid game problems, but like Alvaro and LEO are working well together. Mad are a very exciting team. I think the problem with Mad Lions, Koi, for me, is the drafting that you highlighted out and Myrwn. Because I've said this like 9 times now, and I'm going to say it a 10th time. What the... We have a French Adam, we don't need a Spanish Adam. That's what I'm going to say right now, because this is what Myrwn's like trajectory reminds me of. And again, this is entirely about his play as a dude. He's like one of the nicest guys ever. Yeah. Myrwn is really funny, really charming. But like, start a career, comes in, known for these crazy cheese picks. Oh, that sounds familiar. Busts them out. When people aren't ready for them, they look really good. Keeps busting them out. You know what I mean? Okay, people have kind of figured it out. And like, look, it worked for Adam. Him like playing the Dariuses and the Olafs.
The gods, yeah.
Yeah, well, even before that. In the gods era, I think he was just legitimately good at a lot of champions and had pocket picks. Like, he was on the glow up. But like before that, when he was on Fnatic and Whipple was jungling, it was like, go mid at level 3 and sack a wave. You know? It was like, he did that stuff all the time. And it worked for so long. And it worked for Myrwn and Winter. You know, all these creative picks, the Varus tops, etc. But like the Nico top, to me, is just a reminder that like, at a certain point, you can't rely on just having a counter pick or a range top laner, right? Like, and we can see in Myrwn's stats, like when he has range top laners, like he needs way less jungle attention. He does way better, and that's natural. More often than not, he's probably playing into melee. But like a lot of those games, they're losing because it's hard for him to transition those leagues. And like TF being good was good for this team. And it's not like he can't play melee. He had that really great Yasuo game. But I think that in order for this team to thrive, like Myrwn needs to be more flexible because as you highlighted, like Braum is insane. And if Alvaro wants to be able to play Braum, and Elyoya needs to play a winning early jungle matchup, you know, like sometimes top lane needs to play a tank, man. Sometimes you need to play Ornn. Sometimes you need to just like take the L on the lane. And when he doesn't lose gracefully, that's my biggest thing is like this guy is either like in your face 2.5k gold lead and then like really struggling to transition that mid to late game, or he's losing and then not feeling very impactful. And of course that's hyperbolic. There are games where there are exceptions, but like the general trend is if he has counter pick, if he has his champ, he looks great in lane, but those champs don't usually win games. And I think that is a problem for Mad Lions Koi. As much as I like his unique identity, I think that it needs to be rounded out and fleshed out in the same way that like I think Adam did over the last few years to actually not just be a guy who can pull out these unique picks, but also is just well-rounded as a top laner.
Yeah, I agree. On a side note, I am very scared for the day that Adam plays a lot of Kalista top lane in solo queue. Every time I like research them for playoffs, I'm just like, oh god, like I'm waiting for the day that comes out. But I do agree with you where I agree to a certain extent. I think top lane at the moment is kind of hard to find engaged champions. Yeah. Because like you look at Rumbles, Renekton's, like,
but even just like play some, like have some good Renekton games. I'm happy.
Oh yeah.
You know
Fair.
what I mean?
But I do agree.
Sometimes
I think,
you just need a body. You know what I mean? A lot of these comps don't need Ornn. Yeah. They'll settle for
exactly.
You know, whatever.
And that's what I was going to say. I agree on. It's like, right? I think you need to be able to play your staples.
Yeah.
And if you can't play your Gnar, your Renektons, your these kind of things, that makes it very tough because these are kind of your bread and butter. And like, yeah, you can bring in the razzle dazzle, but you need to be able to do the thing at the end of the day.
And again, there's nuance to this discussion, but it's a pocket pick. You've got it in the side on your pocket. If all you have are the picks in the pocket, that's just your champ pool. And that fits
in a pocket, which is not good.
That's bad. It's a pocket pick when you can do the normal stuff, but then you're like, ooh, here's my secret surprise. When it's like, oh, ranged champion you didn't expect could build on hit. It's like,
sorry,
oh wow, Myrwn, another range champion.
I just had
didn't
this
expect
image
could build
of
on
Myrwn
hit.
having like, you know, the Tabasco sauce holsters. Yeah. And it's just like brings it. I was like, ooh, the spice in them.
I feel like it's like, can I interest you in an egg in these trying times? And it's like, no, why we don't need, sometimes we don't need
you got to kiss the lucky egg, you know?
And you're obviously doing great on it. You're building leads. You're doing great stuff. You're doing it without jungle attention. You're very good at it. But like sometimes if your team is, especially if your team is struggling in mid game, you just got to simplify. And on-hit Nico is not simplifying. And there will be some new Actually, I saw him play an on-hit Kennen game because I've been scouring solo queue. And it won't surprise me if that shit shows up on stage because that's totally his MO. And maybe it'll be good. And maybe it'll be better than Nico because obviously Kennen, a little bit more is actually basically the same champion. I don't know why I said that. Basically, it does the same exact thing as On Hit
Yes.
but maybe it'll be better because On Hit Kennen wins lane and then struggles to impact team fights.
I was gonna say, I don't want to see the On Hit Kennen.
It's the same team.
You're just.
I'm just trying to think of an angle, man, and like he likes that stuff, and I respect that he likes that stuff. But I just want when your team is bad in mid game, and it's not on him. If his team was really sick mid game, and he was a kind of player who could take those leads with the support of his team and just end games, which I'm sure he does.
I'd love to see him just play Gnar.
Yeah, Gnar. Best of both.
You have something that you do well. Look, you'll struggle with some range matchups, but no one really is going to play the range matchup into you.
You always have Gnar to just win a game sometimes.
And then you still get to play the little pokey poke game. You know, you're happy.
Again, a lot on Myrwn, but I do want to see him grow in that resolve because I want a top laner in our league who plays Varus top. I just want a top laner in our league who plays Varus top and also Ornn.
Yeah.
You know, the little things that do it for me. Speaking of Adam, I think the two most people that we saw mentioned here were Noah, and a lot of you guys were salty about Noah. But again, we talked about Noah earlier, and I'm not going to
double dip. Yeah,
I'm not going to beat a dead horse. Noah's going to figure it out, or he's not, and I hope that he can. Obviously, he knows he didn't have a great final. Adam. So a lot of people mentioned Sheo as well, and I think this is kind of the missing piece of the puzzle is BDS, the other big question mark team, right? Where we heard from Adam. He didn't know what was going on. Seemed like they sorted it out in time for KC, which was good. Wasn't the most convincing sorting it out.
Oh, yeah.
But KC obviously was rising as well and doing pretty damn well. And now we're in a situation where our BDS, we have the question, and a part of that is Adam and Sheo, but a lot of the team overall, Labrov, also a big part of that question.
Mm-hmm.
Are they still clear number 3 contesting top 2, or are they similar to the two teams above them, going to be shaky and not going to be able to find that footing? And that's kind of the big thing for me.
Yeah, I'm uncertain. Because it was such a drastic shift, it was just bizarre. Like, there was nobody on the same page together. And I think even the TP plays from Adam were so strange. Like, for me, the way I see BDS is, and I kind of alluded to it already in the earlier on, was a team that will play the game in a very distinct style where they have slowly worked on these things and then they just beat you because their fundamentals are better than you.
Yeah.
But to see them then go for these wacky plays or be like not pick up side lanes, coming to fights late, even the way they tried to set up their bot, like the way they played around bot lane was entirely different in playoffs versus the regular season. Like in the regular season, you'd see them play champions like Jinx or pushing bot lanes. They'd push in boss. 4.5 minutes, they'd rotate top, they'd push out top, they'd take your void grubs, they'd then rotate back bot ahead of you, and then they'd slowly chip away and get these little advantages and just snowball the game through that. And just being smart on the map. But then in playoffs, they just kind of fell back to what we saw from last year, which was playing for dragons and not really looking to extend leads. But their team fighting looked 10 times worse. Their objective setup wasn't as clean. It didn't really make sense. It felt like a massive regression on everything I saw them work on over the course of this year. So I don't know is the honest answer. Usually when you look at a team, it's oh, well, they have forgotten this one thing, but it feels like they've forgotten so much of what they worked on that I don't really understand where to put them now.
Yeah.
It's bizarre.
I really hope that that they see a weakened Fnatic and that kind of inspires them, because we're in this awkward position where so many teams things are breaking down. Odoamne calls it the civil war thing, where every season a team is going to have a falling out. Yeah. And they have to figure it out, whether it's they start losing or whatever. And I hope the BDS, I don't know if that's what's going on with BDS. It seems like based on what Adam said, it's not like it's a conflict. It's just things aren't clicking and they're not sure why. I hope they figured that out, because they're so damn close to Worlds.
Yeah.
They're so close to Worlds, and they've been our most, they are our clear third place team, regardless of what level they've shown in recent weeks and at the tail end of summer.
I don't want to say third place. I want to say top 3.
Top
for them.
Well, I think overall,
okay, whatever.
Yes. Yeah, sure. I'll give you, they should be a top 3 team. We'll see how far they can go. And again, if you just win, that's top 3. You just win the rank. That's top 3 right there. And it doesn't guarantee you Worlds, because G2 could just bomb out and then you have a very tricky situation. You might need to win again. But you're close. And I hope that that fires them up, because I think it's hard for me to pin down just one thing. I think again, Labrov, I'm very sad about. I don't want this thing to be he can only play Rel to stick.
Yeah.
But the evidence just keeps pointing to only the rel is good, right? Because it sucks because when it's like the Hillisang coin flip thing. You know what I mean? It's like once that stuff sticks, it never goes away. Mickey dying early game never goes away. But like the trend is so consistent now that it's hard to point in any other direction. It's like on rel, this man is one of the best, most consistent supports in our league. Off rel, and this is of course exacerbated by the team's general lack of coordination right now, but he just looks lost, man. He just makes weird choices. Sim, like we were roasting Jun and Mickey earlier, and Labrov deserves some of the same treatment. There's some weird ass gameplay, still some highlight moments, and I think that in a world where all supports are a little bit inconsistent, if we kind of just look down the board, fine. But like we've seen Labrov be great, really great, and I think that for BDS to maintain their position in the top 3. He can't just be the rel guy. And I know that the Blitzcrank is there too. People are going to be excited about the hooks, but like I need to see more from him.
I think part of it is that BDS for me has always been a team that struggled with jungle support synergy.
Yeah.
Like you've never really, when you think of like Oyoy and Alvaro moving around the map together, they'll get vision together. They'll set up like pushing through river together. When have you ever seen Labrov and Sheo do that?
Yeah. I mean,
it's just not really
it's not as much. Yeah.
And I think that's where what Mad Lions Koi actually did really well, and we started to see then teams pick it up as it went on, was they realized, wait, Labrov just goes and gets vision by himself. And it's sometimes he tries to cheat a bit of tempo, and like you can actually catch him out. And MDK just hit on a bush, caught him out the second he was going for vision by himself. About 4 times, I think it was, in their series. And then that's why it looked really, really dire for BDS in a lot of situations. And then I think we saw KC start to pick it up as well. I think this is something that teams are going to now look to exploit more and more, is just that you don't have that jungle support synergy, and then Labrov will get caught out and will die. And this is something that he's done for a long time. It's just that teams are now starting to punish it. Yeah. So I don't necessarily think that's just a champion thing. I think that is going to be even if he's on rel, that's still going to happen now. So I think if you have time to prep for this team, this is something that we're going to see more and more, is just teams trying to punish Labrov as he goes for these solo warding expeditions.
Yeah. BDS are a tricky one, man. I think that we're in this interesting position where 3 of our teams, which is G2 Esports, Fnatic, and BDS, feel really uncertain. Giant X, I feel like I have a good handle on. SK Gaming, I feel like I have a good handle on.
This is like, I want to get to this part of the year and go, this team's sick, that team's sick. I can't wait to see them play at Worlds. And I'm just
but
like...
But they are! No, but the thing is Rob, I'm with you. I think that in mid-game inconsistency for a lot of these teams makes it hard to be like 100% the cheerleader for them. But there's still so many sick things about our team. Like Jackie's is worth getting excited over. Juhan is getting better with the team. That's worth getting excited over. Like Niski, when he's not sprinting it on Ezreal mid, is worth getting excited about. The same is true of Rahel and Luan. Like these guys are still cracked. But it is easy when we take a step back from domestic competition to start to see the fear of Worlds, but I'm with you. But I don't want to take that away from the fact that like Nuke has had an insane year. Humor and Razork are still, when they're playing well together, like probably our best mid-jungle duo in the league. I know people are going to be like, yike caps, but I honestly think Razork Humanoid as a duo together better. Like there's so many reasons to be excited by the team. It's just from a purely analytical perspective, a lot of it is undermined by inconsistency. And that sucks, but I don't want to take away from the fact that like these are our 6 best teams. It's a shame that all of them are struggling with consistency, but there are still like so many good reasons to be excited about these teams. It's unfortunate that it's kind of, there's this cloud over it all, which is just like this asterisk that like, if they show up. If they show up.
And look, one of them has got to. Just flip the coin. It's kind of, but no, I
don't want to undermine my own hype, but our finals in summer might indicate otherwise.
But I do think it's, I feel like I'm holding my breath essentially to find out which team it's going to be. Because I want, like, I'm in the same boat as you. This isn't coming from a place of hate. Like, I want to see these teams do well.
Yeah.
And I want to be able to cast and talk about and watch sick League of Legends.
You're like, this is what they're going to do this week without it, you know.
I just need to wait and see what season finals looks like.
Yeah.
But I do feel like it inevitably will be one of these teams just takes this 3 weeks, grabs it by the horns and said, we're doing it. Like, we're going to Worlds, we're taking this and we're going the full way. And I'm very excited to see what team it is, because I do think like a team like Giant X, very fixable mistakes in the mid game. They could be a team that suddenly does become the dark horse. When you look at Mad Lions Koi again, I think there are like compositional things you can change that are going to then set this team up significantly easier. And maybe we do see that resurgence like we saw in winter. Like that could definitely be something. And then you still have our top 4 teams like SK, look sick. Again, I think they also have like overstaying on side waves and stuff in the mid game, but still a force to be reckoned with. And especially if Rahel and Luan are playing at top level again, that's a bot lane you have to fear. So there are reasons to be excited. It's just a case of, I feel like I'm holding my breath to find out which team is going to be the team where I'm like, you're the guys. You're the ones in season finals. You're the team that I'm like, I am rallying behind as we crest through season finals into worlds.
I think in a really strong year, we get to talk about like clash of styles.
Yeah.
And I think in a year where teams are struggling with consistency, and this has been one of those years, it's a lot more about who will show up.
Yeah.
And I think either way, we're fortunate that there's still some excitement. I think this is definitely my less preferred version of that excitement.
Mm-hmm.
But we're in an interesting spot. This weekend is G2, MDK, and Fnatic BDS. Next week, we'll find out the lower bracket matchups. Again, I always second guess myself at this form. I think I'm pretty sure I understand correctly. Basically, the higher seed that makes it through will face the lower seed, which is GX, and the lower seed will face the highest seed, which is SK. Mm-hmm. So if Fnatic win, for example, and BDS, go down, they're very likely to face.
Yeah. I think the easy way to sum it up is Giant X will play either G2 if there's an MDK upset.
Yep.
Or they will play the loser of Fnatic BDS.
Yep. Great.
Yeah.
Perfect. And then obviously the other loser will play against SK.
Yeah.
And then you have your lower bracket run again, elimination. The teams at the top will go to the winners match. Could be the G2 Fnatic run back. Wouldn't be surprised if it was G2 BDS, honestly. Would be very surprised if it was MDK versus anyone. But it's kind of all on the table. It's been a very general episode. We've talked a lot about kind of the struggles of every team. But I think we're in an interesting position. It's also important to note new patch. We didn't talk a lot about 14.14 or 14.15.
Yeah. Aurora.
Aurora is out and is enabled with both hot fixes.
Yeah.
So somewhat balanced. Haven't played a lot of Aurora. I've watched a lot of streams of Aurora. I've watched the Lal Dobby video, as you should all watch Lal Dobby. Great content about Aurora. Looks annoying as hell. Don't know how good it's going to be in pro.
I'm curious to see how she does against the AD mid laners, because I think AD mid laners are still
I'm curious to see if she's permabanned. I think she's 100% permabanned or not picked at all. That is my anticipation. But based on the amount of teams that have referred to her as stupid, I assume she's really strong.
I mean, and
usually when I'm like, hey, how do you feel about this champ? They're like, she's dumb. It doesn't mean she's not playable or useful. It means she's permaban worthy.
Yeah. I mean, the ultimate locking everyone in us to be like, really hey, insane. We are fighting here is great.
Yeah.
But in my head, she kind of feels like a bit of a snowball more champ.
Sure.
Where it's like, hey, if you're already ahead, she looks great because she has to play in like that attack the back line, kind of hop in and out of invisibility after you've killed someone. So I'm curious how she does in pro play. I think she's a great solo queue, but I'm curious for pro play.
She's clearly a good solo queue champion. I think if she is in pro play, it's probably because her numbers are too high. Yes. If the meta remains similar. There are other metas where I think she would be, more reliable, but there's so much front to back and so much scaling AD threats, and that doesn't seem like where she should fit. Yeah. So we'll see kind of how she fits into professional play overall. Rob, any final words before we close out the episode? Thanks again to everyone who submitted questions. Really appreciate the dialogue here. And despite, our hesitation, I'm incredibly excited for season finals, man.
Yeah.
Look,
I'm just excited for League of Legends again.
I'm excited for League of Legends. You're right. Yeah. And I'm excited for new patch because despite the fact that AD carries clearly aren't dead yet because 14-16 explicitly said now we're ready. We're putting the final nail in the AD carry solo lane coffins. I'm seeing a lot of Zeri mid. I'm seeing a lot of
Corky mid,
Zeri mid, Lucian mid. So this is the last chance for all of those particular mid laners.
I don't think it's ever going to happen. It's been a lot of Zed buffs. A lot of Zed buffs. He's also got a pretty high win rate, if I remember, from solo queue. I think
he's an insane win rate in solo queue.
I want to see it.
You're going to look up the Zed win rate?
Yeah.
All I'll say is now is a good time if you've never been to lolpros.gg. Great website.
Or Lolalytics as well.
Lolalytics for general champion win rates. Lolpros if you want to see what people are playing. I'm going to tell you right now, spoiler. Niski, there's a lot of Smolder. There's a lot of Zeri. Smolder mid. I know, you guys hated Smolder Zeri meta, and now it's in mid lane where everyone can participate, but I'm actually excited about it, which is very weird, but I'm kind of just ready for some chaos this weekend because there's also a bunch of Zeri top. There's LeBlanc top. I'm seeing everything in these solo queue records.
Yeah, it's insane. It's crazy. Zed is banned in 28% of games, picked in about 10%, so which is the second highest pick rate in mid lane.
Yeah, I remember them talking about how he just is an insanely high ban presence, and he's just a really tricky champion because people just hate Zed.
Yeah.
Which if you've ever mained Zed, you can understand why. I think we've all gone through that edgy boy period. But enough of our edgy boy period. This is the end of episode 18 of Euphoria, ahead of week 1 of the season finals, Saturday, Sunday, this weekend. MDK versus G2, BDS versus Fnatic. Tune in, check it out. We'll see you guys there, and we'll see you next week for another episode of Euphoria.